Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Christopher Bosen. We have some people telling me that there are slight sound issues, but we are getting feedback as well that people can hear us, so I hope that the few people that might have an issue with sound, either if you're using computer sound, then maybe try and choose the phone-in audio and use a mobile phone or a desktop phone and follow the instructions that you get. You get a PIN code just when you click to phone audio. Usually the sound is slightly better on the phone audio than on the computer. It's more stable. But if you're okay on your computer, then welcome. As I said, my name is Christopher Bosen. Welcome to this webinar. With me today I have Joanna McLaughlin, and she always laughs because, as you can hear, I'm not a native Scotsman, and she always laughs at my pronunciation. Actually, she gets a little bit insulted, but not today. Joanna is the National Violence Against Women Network Coordinator. She works here at the Improvement Service. She's going to be doing the introduction to an equally safe quality standards and performance network. I'm just going to hand over to you right away, Joanna.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on the Equally Safe Quality Standards and Performance Framework.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. The presentation is going to be about 30 minutes, and then after that, we're going to do a Q&A session. You can either write the questions to me via the questions box or chat box on your right-hand side on the panel, on your control panel, or if you want to say something when we go to the Q&A directly to Joanna, we can put you through with either the phone or the microphone that you're using, but we're going to take that again when we get to it. So sorry about interrupting you.
No problem at all. And Chris kind of alluded to the aims of today's session. We're just going to talk a little bit about the Equally Safe Quality Standards and Performance Framework, which the Improvement Service was delighted to publish in partnership with the Scottish Government and COSLA and the National Violence Against Women Network earlier this month. We want to raise awareness of the indicators that are included in the quality standards and performance framework and ensure violence against women partnerships and their partner organisations feel confident in completing the data return sheets and are aware about all the deadlines for doing so. And as Chris mentioned, really we want to give people an opportunity to ask any questions they might have about it, but also just to let you know that we're here for ongoing support as we roll the performance framework and quality standards out. Firstly, I just wanted to say a little bit about the background to developing this resource, which I know a lot of people have been involved in, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Equally Safe is Scottish Government and COSLA's joint strategy for preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls. And it sets out their joint vision for a strong and flourishing Scotland where all individuals are equally safe and respected, and where women and girls live free from all forms of violence and abuse and the attitudes that help perpetuate it. It's recognised, I think, internationally as an incredibly ambitious strategy. And one of the things Equally Safe was clear about when it was published is that it's not enough just to set high-level priorities and an ambitious strategy if we have no way of measuring our progress against achieving those. So in the revised version of Equally Safe that was published in 2016, the Scottish Government and COSLA said a crucial component of our work going forward is that we're able to measure our performance at a local level and set out their plans to develop a suite of outcomes and indicators that enable all partners to understand the difference being made at a national and local level. And that's really what the Equally Safe Quality Standards and Performance Framework aim to do. A little bit of background: when Equally Safe was first published, they set out 4 work streams. One of them was the accountability work stream, which I was involved in leading in partnership with Scottish Women's Aid, and it was tasked with developing a set of national indicators and local indicators to measure progress towards achieving Equally Safe. For those who are involved in this process, that began with a lot of research about looking at the indicators that were currently being used by violence against women partnerships across Scotland to measure their progress. It also involved a series of workshops with partnerships and other stakeholders to consult both on the data they were currently collecting and on the data that they would find useful to understand both the prevalence of violence and abuse at a local level and the progress that they were making in eradicating and preventing it. And then we used all this research and the feedback from stakeholders to produce a long list of potential indicators. And I always joke about the progress that we've made from that point, where I believe we had about 200 potential indicators, which was a little bit overwhelming. But it's great to see that we've then managed to get it down to the 7 core indicators, which are included in the draft performance management framework. And one of the pieces of feedback that's always stuck with me during the consultations was people said that if we can measure one thing, we really need to understand if the work that we're doing on the ground is making a difference to women's safety and well-being, and I should say women and children's safety and well-being. So when we put together the short list of indicators, that was very much on our minds, and we wanted to make sure we were focusing on outcome indicators wherever possible to really understand the impact and difference that was being made to people's lives. As part of that process, we agreed to remove a lot of the potential activity indicators that were in some of the earlier drafts of the performance framework, and they now form the basis of the quality standards which have been included in the framework. And I'm incredibly grateful for the 10 local authority areas which piloted the draft performance framework and gave extensive feedback, which I hope you'll see embedded in the final version of the quality standards and performance framework that is being published. We worked really closely with the analysts from the Equality Division to develop an outcomes framework. And the outcomes framework that you can see on your screen just now is the one that was included in the Equally Safe Delivery Plan that was published by the Scottish Government and COSLA in November 2017, following extensive consultations with national and local stakeholders. And the aim of this was to turn the 4 equally safe priorities into a series of short, medium, and long-term outcomes, and then identify a suite of national indicators and local indicators that could show progress towards those outcomes. And when we were working with analysts at the Scottish Government, we identified something really interesting quite quickly, was that by making use of existing national performance indicators, we were able to show progress towards 3 of the equally safe priorities, but we weren't able to show any progress towards equally safe priority 3, which is interventions are early and effective, preventing violence and maximising the safety and well-being of women, children and young people. And in some ways that's not very surprising, because that's the indicator that's most closely related to work happening on the ground by community groups. However, feedback also showed that's the priority that forms the purpose of the majority of work that Violence Against Women partnerships and local violence against women organisations are undertaking. And it's the one, again, going back to that feedback that we had at the earlier consultation, that people really wanted to show progress against.
Just a moment, we just have a sound problem here. I'll just fix it. Sorry about that, but people are getting echoes here, so and that's my fault.
Excellent. So again, when we were developing the performance framework, equally safe priority 3 and to a lesser degree equally safe priority 4 are the main ones that we focused on with the indicators. As mentioned before, we also recognised that we wanted to understand the policies, services and interventions happening at a local level that contribute to those indicators, but we were conscious that we didn't want to be collecting numbers for the sake of it, and feedback from stakeholders was it would be much more useful if we could develop some sort of checklist, and that's the purpose of the quality standards. So I'll be talking about both the performance framework and the quality standards in more detail, but that's a bit of the background about how the resource evolved. So, the Equally Safe Quality Standards and Performance Framework were published in May 2018, and it aims to support violence against women partnerships to measure and demonstrate the progress being made to implement Equally Safe at a local level and identify areas for improvement. The quality standards in particular aim to raise awareness of the types of services, policies and processes that are most effective in tackling violence against women and girls, and capture data on the extent that they are currently being delivered across Scotland. Whereas the performance framework aims to measure the impact that these services, policies and processes are having on the lives of people and communities at a local level. Collectively, the two resources aim to support violence against women partnerships to capture key performance data and facilitate a consistent approach to measuring and reporting on the progress being made to achieve the ambitions set out on Equally Safe. Just going into the aims a little bit more, the overall purpose of the Equally Safe Quality Standards and Performance Framework is to support multi-agency violence against women partnerships to measure and report on the progress being made to prevent and eradicate violence against women, with the ultimate aim of reducing inequalities and improving outcomes for some of the most vulnerable people in society. So collectively, the two resources aim to do a series of things, including measuring the activity and performances of partnerships, identifying areas for improvement to help inform future service planning and strategic investment at a local level, to try to generate data on the social and economic impacts of violence against women and girls, and highlight to key stakeholders within community planning partnerships the importance of prioritising this agenda when tackling wider inequalities, and also to provide useful data to support the Scottish Government and COSLA to show the progress being made to achieve the outcomes set out in Equally Safe, identify any areas of underperformance where additional resources or support may be required. And that's an important thing. We'll be reporting back to the Scottish Government and COSLA on our key learning, and we're interested to know where there's barriers and where progress isn't being made to inform future work and efforts in this area. And we've said all along that not only is Equally Safe incredibly ambitious, but so is this quality standards and performance framework. And we fully recognise that in the short term, there's going to be significant gaps in data. And that's particularly true for this first year of data returns, where we're asking for violence against women partnerships to be retroactively looking back on the work that's been undertaken in the last financial year when the performance framework indicators and the quality standards had not yet been finalised. So a short-term aim of the resource is to identify where there are gaps in data that might limit our understanding of the scope and scale of violence against women and girls and the progress being made to achieve it. And again, look at how we could support some of those gaps and address them going forward. So, talking through the performance framework indicators, as I mentioned, feedback said that from stakeholders was that they would like to see a small number of indicators. So there's 7 local performance indicators included in the performance framework. 1 input indicator looking at funding that's being invested in preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls at a local level. And the aim of that in the long term is to try and track whether we're seeing any shifts in resources moving from crisis services to preventative services, with prevention being very key to what's in Equally Safe. A small number of activity indicators looking at things like numbers of referrals to specialist violence against women support services and who they're coming from, and the average length of time women and children affected by violence and abuse need to wait to access specialist support services. And that very much links to Equally Safe Priority 3 about ensuring that services are in place that are early, effective and identify women and children at the earliest point, and numbers of referrals to specialist perpetrator interventions. And 5, 6, 7 are all outcome indicators, looking at the numbers of perpetrators who complete specialist interventions, but more importantly, again, going back to that feedback we received at the early stage, trying to collect some data consistently at local level about the percentage of women and children who feel safer and feel like they have increased well-being as a result of the support that they've received. In addition to the data that will be provided on these 7 local indicators, the IS will also be working closely with the analysts in the Scottish Government to look at which of the national indicators can be broken down into a local authority level. And we'll be including those in the reports that we compile and send out. So specifically indicators around gender pay gap, percentage of local councillors, MSPs and MPs who are women, number of women who report being victims of different forms of abuse, number of men convicted of violence against women related crimes. They're all indicators that we hope will be able to break down into a local authority level and hopefully take some burden off violence against women partnerships having to chase this data themselves from police colleagues or justice or education analysts that will be able to do some of that analysis on your behalf and add to the data that you're collecting on the ground. So in terms of the reporting requirements, an Excel spreadsheet was issued to all Violence Against Women Partnership leads at the start of this month to support them to collect and share data on the local performance indicators. And it's intended that partnership leads will be working closely with their partner organisations to provide indicators on data on the indicators that they're contributing to. And we're asking people, each partnership, to send us 1 completed data return by the 31st of July 2018. And just to flag up, in the Equally Safe Performance Framework and Quality Standards main report, it talks about a deadline of the 30th of June of each year. And that is our intention to work to that going forward. But for this first year, due to delays in publishing the resource, we've extended the deadline to the 31st of July 2018. And here's just a screenshot of one of the pages from the data return template, where you'll see that there's cells set up on the spreadsheet where partners can enter data on the numbers of people that are relevant to this indicator, and there should be formulas set up as well to calculate information on relevant indicators on people's behalf. If you scroll down on each cell, there'll be additional information, including support on how to collect data on each indicator, and also the rationale and some of the limitations of doing so. So we were very clear when we were including indicators in the performance framework to highlight what outcome they were contributing to and what this indicator would, but also really importantly, would not tell us. So we recognise that no one indicator on its own will tell us very much, but we hope that the suite of indicators compiled with other evaluations that Violence Against Women partnerships are undertaking at a local level and other data that are collecting will give us a good understanding of the progress being made towards equally safe. For each indicator, you'll also see in the data returns template that we've included a box where we're asking partners to include additional information. So you could be using this box to highlight any limitations in the data that you've been collecting, that you're able to provide. And again, that goes back to the point we fully recognise that not every Violence Against Women partnership will be able to collect data on every indicator. So highlighting some of those gaps is something that you could use the box. Also, if you feel that there's additional data that you're collecting at the moment, this could be a good place to be putting some of that information as well. The consensus when we were developing the performance indicators was to start with a very small suite of core indicators and try and work with people to collect and report on those consistently. But even at this stage, people are saying, well, we think it would also be useful to include data on this. So if you're collecting it and you would like to see it included in the performance framework in the longer term, then this could be a useful place to include additional information that you think gives more context to your data in the cells. Moving on now to the Equally Safe quality standards. As I mentioned briefly at the start, the Equally Safe Quality Standards aim to add value to the performance framework by raising awareness of the types of services, policies and processes that the evidence base suggests are most effective in tackling violence against women and girls, and capture data on the extent to which they're currently being delivered across Scotland. To highlight what good practice looks like when supporting women and children affected by violence and abuse, and provide a benchmark of excellence that organisations can work towards achieving, and supporting local authority areas to identify any areas for improvement. And it's really important to stress that we fully recognise that the specific services, policies and processes that local authority areas have in place will vary depending on their own individual needs, resources and priorities. So the quality standards aren't intended to be a prescriptive list. They're really supposed to highlight what good practice looks like, but also recognising that the services that may be needed in Dumfries and Galloway may vary completely from the services that are needed in Glasgow or Orkney. So it's intended that you will have that in mind and also be linking to your own priorities and needs assessments that have been undertaken at a local level. The quality standards are split into 5 sections. The first section looks at multi-agency partnership working, and the indicators included in that are the minimum standards and key activities that the Scottish Government and COSLA set out in the Violence Against Women Partnership Guidance that was published in 2016. The remaining 4 sections aim to identify the services and processes that are in place that contribute to the 4 priority areas set out in Equally Safe. It's important to note that while direct responsibility for meeting some of the quality standards may sit with other organisations or thematic partnerships within the local authority area, with the Violence Against Women Partnership Guidance highlighting that multi-agency partnerships have an important role to play in providing quality assurance for local services, policies and processes to ensure that they're evidence informed and contribute to positive outcomes for women and children. So the quality standards, particularly around priority 1, 2, 3 and 4, are designed to assist violence against women partnerships in carrying out the quality assurance role. Linked to that, completing the quality standards is really intended to be a collaborative exercise, and our hope is that in undertaking it, Violence Against Women Partnerships will consult both with their own member organisations, but with other relevant thematic partnerships that have responsibility for delivering services to women and children at a local level. So, for example, Section 5 of the quality standards looks at the priority around men desisting from all forms of violence against women and girls and perpetrators of such violence receiving a robust and effective response. So in undertaking the self-assessment of the quality standards for that section, it would obviously make sense for partnerships to consult with Community Justice Partnership colleagues, Police Scotland colleagues, MARAC arrangements, whoever the relevant partnerships and processes at a local level. And while the first section of the quality standards is really looking at the structures within partnerships, the other 4 sections is really trying to get a knowledge of what services, policies and processes are in place within the local authority area as a whole. In terms of reporting around the quality standards, a Word document was issued to all Violence Against Women Partnership leads earlier this month to support them to self-assess themselves against the standards in the checklist, highlighting whether they meet, partly meet or do not meet each of the standards within their local authority area. And as you'll see in the data return template and in the main document itself, we've included a criteria for meet, partly meets and doesn't meet for each of the quality standards. And where a partnership identifies that a standard is not met or only partly met, we'll be encouraging them to provide additional information on the reasons for this, including any challenges they've encountered, or going back to my earlier point, if this is just not being identified as a priority within your local authority area and you've chose to focus on other activities. But also, if you are saying it is a challenge, but you're just not currently undertaking activities on it, it'd be useful if partners could use the additional information box to include information on any work they or other stakeholders within the local authority area plan to undertake in the coming year to meet the standards. So the aim of the quality standards, I suppose, is to help partnerships or local authority areas put in place a bit of an improvement plan if they identify that there's areas that they're not doing work where they feel that they should be going forward. And this is just a screenshot again of one of the sections of the quality standards, and you'll see that there's a checkbox that you can click highlighting whether you feel that you meet, partly meet, or don't meet at all the quality standard with the definition underneath it. And then later on in each section, there'll be that comments box that I talked about where you can provide more information. Finally, next steps in terms of deadlines and support. Data returns, as mentioned earlier, we're asking for the completed data returns for both the equally safe quality standards and for the performance frameworks to be sent to the Violence Against Women account at the Improvement Service by the 31st of July 2018. And I've included the email address there. It's also in the main document and in the individual data returns for both the performance framework and the quality standards. And then going forward, our plan is that the Violence Against Women team within the IS will be collating and analysing all the data provided, and we will be producing both reports for each local authority area and a national report by the end of October 2018. We'll be sharing that information with the Scottish Government and COSLA to feed into their national report that they'll be putting on the progress to implement the delivery plan. But as with the quality standards and the performance framework themselves, the main audience for this is local violence against women partnerships, and we're hoping that people will use this, find this useful data to inform future planning and work going on in an area. And we'll be sharing copies of the draft national and local report with violence against women partnerships in advance of it being published. We're also really aware that this is the first year that we're rolling this out, and while we're not calling it a pilot, I think in essence that probably is what it's going to be. We've learned so much just developing the quality standards and performance framework over the last 2.5 years, and I'm sure we'll learn much more about what we've maybe not got right as partnerships begin to provide data. So we're really keen that you can give us feedback on both your experiences of collecting the data in the document, but also the tools that we've put together to support this. So particularly the data returns template, when we were piloting it last year, we got some feedback from people that it was a little bit clunky. I hope we've made improvements to that, but I'm sure we could improve it even further. So please feel free to let us know what we could potentially be doing better. We do want to learn from this. And if there's indicators that people out there feel when they're working through them aren't relevant or could be improved upon, then that's useful feedback. We obviously don't want to make too many changes to the performance framework and quality standards as we're working with partnerships to move towards a consistent model. We certainly don't want to be changing it every year. But if there's tweaks and refinements we can be making to make it more user-friendly and fit for purpose, that's absolutely something that we do want to be doing. Ongoing support-wise, the IS will be continuing to provide any support over the coming months as you're collecting data. On the back of this webinar, but also the emails we've already received or phone calls from people asking questions, we're hoping to create a frequently asked question sheet, which we'll be sharing with all partnerships to hopefully assist in the process. We'll also be setting up a separate section on the K-Hub to share information, but also encourage people to connect to each other to share any advice. So I'm not sure if it will come up in questions today. Some of the questions that I've already had from some stakeholders relating to the quality standards are things like, can you share a really good example of a robust policy for tackling all forms of violence against women and girls? And the answer to that is I cannot, but I'm hoping that other violence against women partnerships may be able to. And certainly one of my hopes is that if there are areas that are coming back and ticking that fully meets this, we'll be able to go out to them and say, are you willing to share your policies? And then we can share those with other partnerships for future years. Similarly, some partnerships have been in touch saying, can you share a really robust evaluation framework for measuring improved safety and well-being? When we were consulting on these indicators, one of the things that was highlighted is that particularly third sector specialist organisations have developed, in some cases, their own tools and are using those. So we didn't want to be prescriptive about the tools people to use, telling them that they had to use certain tools. But if we can develop a suite of high quality tools that we could share with people, I think that would also be a really good short-term outcome from the first year of piloting this work. I do have some resources that we can be sharing with people just now. If people have any questions and need any support after this webinar, obviously there'll be time in a minute to ask questions that you have just now. Please as ever feel free to contact us. Again, I've put the generic Violence Against Women IS email account here, but you can contact me or Madeline directly. Our email addresses are there on the K-Hub also, or just feel free to pick up the phone anytime. Also, this is a standing offer if you feel it would be useful for Madeline and myself to come out and meet with your Violence Against Women partnership to be talking about any of these issues, answering any questions they have either before the return deadline or afterwards to talk about next steps, then that's something that we're more than happy to do. Okay, I think I've got to the end of my slides. Thank you everyone for sticking with me. I know it's not the most exciting topic, although I think my inner nerd has come out that I probably find it more interesting than most people. But thank you for listening, and I'm happy to open it up to any questions if people have any that are hopefully not too hard and I can answer.
Thank you very much, Joe. You made this difficult to ask questions for because you gave a lot of service there as to where to ask the questions otherwise. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat box on the right hand side, or if you want to talk to Joe directly, so we're happy to open up the microphones, but then you will have to raise your hand and then I will let you know when I'm putting you through. So Joe, while we're hopefully getting some questions in, is this available online for others to see as well, or are people allowed to share it with others? Or
absolutely, we'd really encourage you to share it. So it's on the Improvement Service website at the moment. If you go straight on to the homepage, it's part of the it's being promoted there. It's also in the Violence Against Women section. I've shared it with all Violence Against Women partnership leads, and we're encouraging them to share it with their partners locally. We'll also be sharing it on the K-Hub. The Equally Safe and the Scottish Government's bulletin went out on Friday. They're promoting it. So really we're trying to promote it as widely as we can. We want people to be aware of this resource. We're really proud of it, but also it's only effective if people are using it.
So we have one question that's come through. I don't know if I'm supposed to say who questions are for, but everybody knows each other on this network, so I presume that would be okay. And now there are more questions coming in, so I just have to expand my box here so I can actually see all of them. Sorry about that. Just a moment. So we have Lynn asking, you said that all partnerships were provided with a spreadsheet and Word document, and she's the lead of West Lothian and haven't received either document. Can you advise?
Ooh, I'm sorry to hear that, Lynn. We sent out, I think it was 2 weeks ago, from the generic IS Violence Against Women account, and I did hear from another partnership that they said that they haven't received it either, and I wonder if it's because it went to a long list of people from the generic account that's maybe gone to some people's spam or junk box. So I will upload these on the K-Hub and I'll send them back out from my account today, just in case anyone else hasn't received them yet. But what you should have got was, along with an invitation to come along to today's webinar, a PDF of the quality quality standards and performance framework, an Excel spreadsheet including the data returns template, and a Word document which was the data returns for the quality standards.
We have another question from Gillian. And Gillian, I was lucky enough to meet at a webinar recently and ask questions on her behalf. But hi, Gillian. I've passed it on to you. You should be able to see it on your screen as well, Joe. Thanks for this. I have a fairly specific question about a measure within the performance framework. The measure on perpetrator interventions include all violence against women categories. Do we have expectations of intervention that perpetrators of FGM and CSE, sorry, I'm not familiar with all the terms, would go through? Made me think that maybe this is something we could consider in the short term. For example, get a set of recommended perpetrator interventions across all forms of violence against women. Can you see the question there?
I can, in a very tiny line, so I'm having to scroll down. Yeah, that's a really good question, Gillian. So when we were consulting about this, the feedback we got from people was if there were perpetrator interventions in place at a local level, they would generally only be domestic abuse interventions. However, we thought it would be really useful to almost collect evidence to show that how limited the focus of some perpetrator interventions are, especially if other areas were identifying need. We were also really interested to see if there are any areas that are delivering perpetrator interventions on issues such as FGM and forced marriage, and to start identifying if we're seeing any movement in this area. So realistically, we're expecting a lot of not applicables or not happening within these boxes, but the aim of this is to open up conversations with partnerships about whether they feel it would be useful to have these interventions on the ground, and hopefully give us data and learning that we can then take to the Scottish Government and COSLA and have conversations about, do we need to be looking at resources for this?
Just a short question. I figured out one of the abbreviations, but FGM and CSE, could you explain if there's somebody who doesn't know that? I mean, the people in the network do, but we are recording this. So
sorry. So CSE in this context is commercial sexual exploitation, but it's a difficult acronym because in other contexts it means child sexual exploitation. But in the data returns template, I think all abbreviations will be explained in full somewhere. So there's generally an asterisk near them, but also in the main guidance, it should be fully put out. So if people do have any questions about what abbreviations mean, then definitely get in touch.
Yeah, it's mostly if people are listening to the recording of this afterwards, it's difficult to ask the question. FGM is female genital mutilation, is that correct? Yes. Thank you very much. Question from Louise: how do we record support to boys affected by DA, 16 years and over?
We haven't included that in the performance framework because we focused on interventions for women, girls and children, and we took the cut-off line for children being anyone under the age of 16. However, again, this is something that did come up in consultation. People felt it would be useful to include information on interventions not only happening with boys, but with men. So if you would like to collect information, or if you are collecting information on that and you would like to share it with us, then I'd suggest doing so in the additional information box. And if you would like to see that included as an indicator in future and built into the data return template, then that would also be a good place to flag that up, and we could potentially look at it when we're reviewing and refining the document next year.
Louise has another question. I think it's technical for the filling in of this. How do we record existing service users at 1st of April 2017, as these are neither new or repeat withdrawals?
That is a really good question, and a question that I had not thought about, Louise. Yeah, I think probably, maybe it'd be best to decide within your partnership what you want to do with it. I would think the additional information box would be a good place again to include that. However, if you wanted to include it as any referrals any new or existing referrals that had happened within that period, but putting in the additional information box highlighting this obviously won't include existing people that groups are working with. And I suppose we just need to be aware that that's a limitation, and we can include some information in that in the narrative of the report we pull together. But this is one of those examples that is just something that we didn't think about because we're not the ones providing the data, so that's really useful to flag up.
Okay, Louise asked again in relation to the question about how do we record support to boys affected by domestic abuse, 16 years and over. She explains further here, we meant if a boy has experienced domestic abuse and is in education and 16 and over, they are entitled to receive support, and this should be recorded.
I imagine it would be recorded within social work activities or child protection. Louisa, obviously you'll know much better than I do, but it's one of the pieces of information that we haven't included in the Equally Safe Quality Standards and Performance Framework on that sort of basis of focusing in on a small number of indicators and data broken down. Again, if people are collecting or required to collect additional data and you feel that we should be including it in the report we put together, then I suggest the additional information box would be the best place. And again, if you feel this is something that in future years you would like to see included in this, then it's something we can build in, but it's not something we focused in on this year. We have just kind of following consultation, we've gone for children, anyone aged 16 and under, young women, which is kind of that teenage group, and women generally, trying to link them to the equally safe definitions.
Louise is commenting back here that equally safe acknowledges the UNCRC definition of the child. Do you want me to repeat that, or?
No, I suppose it'd be, Louise, if you have any ideas about how you think it'd be useful for us to be recording it, whether it's including a separate box within the framework or changing the definition of children. Again, the definitions that we included of 0 to 15 years who identify as any gender was the product of consultations with violence against women partnerships and other stakeholders, and I suppose different people had different ideas about the best definition to use. If you feel that we haven't used the best one, or you feel it'd be useful to have a more formal way of collecting this information in the performance framework, I'm more than happy to look at building that in, and I suppose it would be really useful if you could just let us know the best way to do it and we can incorporate it.
Gillian comments on this conversation as well. Just as a follow-up to Louise's question, we are considering young women as directly experiencing domestic abuse in their own right. That's from partner rather than as the child of an adult affected. And Louise also says, thank you, we'll leave the info in the additional comments box. So
that's really helpful. And yeah, so an additional information box, and if, again, as I say, if there's other ways you want us to include it in future years, we can definitely do so. And yeah, I think that was my thinking too, Gillian, that it would be young women who would be directly experiencing, but also I suppose there's that thinking that children are both...
Gillian corrected me. She said, are we considering young women as directly experiencing? That's my fault here. I can't read, apparently. Are we considering young women as directly experiencing domestic abuse in their own right, i.e. from their partner, rather than as the child of an adult affected?
I think what we've said, perhaps vaguely, is affected by. So both for children and young women could be people who have either experienced directly or been in households where this is happening, with that sort of recognition that both children and young women would be both experiencing and viewing. Again, if you think it'd be useful to have additional information on that, then feel free to include it.
Okay, For now, we don't have any more questions, so if you have any questions, please feel free to write them, or we can open up the phone if you... Oh, we have one coming through in a moment. Or we can open up the microphones or the phones if you want to talk directly with Joe. Louise says, the template has questions about delay in accessing a service. However, we could not see how to record when it was not possible to offer the service. The most obvious would be where refuge accommodation is not available.
Yeah, again, and I feel like I keep giving slightly cop-out answers. I suppose the additional information box would be the best place to be putting information about where the reasons behind things. So if it looks like refuge accommodation has a very short waiting list, but actually we're seeing a high number of people just being rejected because it's not available whatsoever, that would be probably more qualitative data that we would need to gather to give kind of more context to those figures. So if there's not a cell to complete things specifically on the spreadsheet, then I suppose it's just encouraging people to use the additional information box as a catch-all for any either detail they want to provide about the information and the cells, or if there's things that we're not collecting that we think we should be collecting in future years.
Question, will guidance be available on how feel safer and well-being will be defined?
So there is a definition, but again, we recognise it's quite a vague definition. What we've talked about is self-reported feelings of well-being and safety using a distance travelled sort of model. Feedback that we've had already from people has highlighted concerns that because of the nature of support that some women, children have, they often won't be doing kind of filling in those sort of tools at the start and the end of their journey with a service, and quite often that post service support evaluation is not being complete, which limits our understanding of the distance travelled. When we piloted it and asked for information, we asked people to share information about tools that they were currently using to measure improvements in well-being and safety. And it's not an area we got a lot of feedback on. We've had some really helpful information shared from Rape Crisis Scotland and Scottish Women's Aid about the tools that their agencies tend to use and what are some of the strengths and limitations of them, which we can absolutely share. I think one of the learnings from the first year will just be trying to get an idea of the tools, the different services and different violence against women partnerships are either using or promoting, and then hopefully in the following year we'll be able to give more guidance and hopefully even publish some kind of a suite of potential tools that people could be using as good practice. So things like outcome stars and wellbeing webs all have their own guidance to go along with them. And as mentioned earlier, we didn't want to go down the route of being overly prescriptive, but I also recognise it's a little bit frustrating if people are looking for guidance or support about which tools to use and how to measure this in a consistent and robust way. But it was one of the areas where there just seemed to be a lot of different views, and in absence of not including any indicators on well-being and safety, I suppose we thought that we would include them and use this as a learning year to understand what tools people were using and provide hopefully a bit more guidance later this year.
Thank you. We have a question from Lee. Will you be taking feedback in relation to the national indicators in the framework? And if so, how would be the best way to go about doing this?
I won't personally. It's the Scottish Government who has led on the national indicators, although I'm sure that they would be very happy to take feedback. So if you wanted to either share any feedback with me, I can definitely feed that in, or if you wanted to contact them directly with feedback on the national indicators, then that's something that I'm sure that they would welcome. I know they will be reviewing the national indicators annually in the same way that we'll be reviewing the local indicators. I know the national indicators are very much based on existing administrative and performance data that's available from existing surveys, but those surveys and reports are often refined every few years. So having that feedback might not be something that they're instantly able to change, but it might be really useful learning for them if they're getting to a review period. So I'd very much encourage people to share any feedback that they have on the national indicators. Alison Stout, who is the equalities analyst with the Scottish Government, who led on the development of the national indicators and worked really closely with me over the last couple of years in developing the performance framework and the outcome framework, had hoped to be here today, but unfortunately had to give her apologies due to a scheduling conflict. But I know she'll be reviewing the national indicators, and for anyone who met Alison, she came along and did a lot of the consultation workshops that we were involved in, is very passionate about the subject and keen to look at what can be done to improve both local indicators and national indicators.
Thank you. So, question, given the first year will be more about finding our feet with this, is there merit in anonymizing individual local authority areas in the drilled down data in the IS report in October 2018?
If people feel that there's merit in doing it, then I'm certainly happy to look at that. I'd imagine the national report that we put together will be more highlighting where there's themes and gaps in data, and maybe identifying examples of promising practice or things that we could be doing. It's certainly not about benchmarking people, and it's certainly not about rating one local authority area over another, and that's not just for the first year. That's not the intention for the quality standards or performance frameworks in any year. So if people do think it'd be useful for data to be anonymous, we can do that. I know other local authority areas are keen to learn from each other, so I suppose it would be useful to see if we could help connect areas that maybe don't have systems in place that want to develop them with areas that do already have them. But that doesn't necessarily need to be in the national report. It's something I'm more than happy to take thoughts and feedback on. As I say, we'll be sharing draft both local reports and the national reports with all violence against women partnerships before we publish anything or share them with the Scottish Government. So maybe that would be a good opportunity for people to highlight any concerns they maybe have. But I think inevitably the first year will be more about the process and the implementation and highlighting where we do have data and what trends are telling us, rather than highlighting what specific local authority areas are doing anyway.
Okay, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left of the time slot here. We don't have any more questions at the moment, so this is your very last chance of entering a question for Joe, since I can't help here. Joe, so you've already said that there are some deadlines in July, and the report will be coming out in October. What happens then? What do you hope for a difference, or what is going to happen after this report?
I think it's an interesting question because it's the first time we have done this. We don't really know how much data we're going to get, but I would hope at the very least we'd be looking to bring together partnerships across Scotland to share information, to talk about, make some of those connections that we talked about along with Scottish Government and COSLA, and maybe talk about what next, both for the performance framework, but also is this identifying any themes or trends that we need to be looking at? And the Scottish Government's also been really clear that when they published the delivery plan, that was intended to be an iterative plan as well. So it's potentially looking at, are we identifying any key themes, trends, gaps that we might want to see in future iterations of the delivery plan, as well as looking at, is there any learning that we can use to improve and refine the quality standards and performance framework going forward? But I'm really interested to see what data and learning we get back. And while I feel like I keep saying this, and I hope people are conceiving it as a dismissive comment. I think I'm really interested in some of the qualitative information as well. So I'm really intrigued to see what we'll get in the additional information box, both for the performance framework and the quality standards. Because again, when we were developing this, data only tells us what's happening, and it doesn't tell us why it's happening. So it's only a really tiny part of the picture. So having more information and context can only increase our learning and hopefully only improve our response to tackling and eradicating violence against women and girls. So I think it's really hopefully a useful exercise, and hopefully it will generate some really useful discussions going forward.
Thank you. Last few questions and comments. So the first one is a comment, it's a comment saying, just want to say huge well done to Joe, Madeline, Tanya, and everyone else who's been involved in this. Fantastic job, even though it's likely to cause most of us coordinators a huge headache over the coming weeks. I'm not going to put a name to that, but I just want to give the feedback.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your advice this morning. Question was, are you able to share this presentation? And it would be helpful to help our partners understand both tools. So where are you sharing and what are you sharing?
Absolutely. We'll be sharing both the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of this webinar afterwards, probably later this week. I'll upload both onto the K-Hub, but I'll also send out as an email, going back to that comment earlier about some people saying that they haven't received the data returns template. So it might be useful if I just send an email out with everything in it. And if you haven't had it by the end of the week, please get in touch. I'm pretty sure I've got an accurate list of everyone's contact details, but I know especially big documents and documents that go to a lot of people in council systems in particular can sometimes go to certain folders or get blocked. So if you haven't received something, please pick up the phone and let me know.
Thank you very much. I'm going to close the line for the questions. There are no more questions and comments. We have a note on all the questions, so I will be giving those to Jo afterwards so she can follow up if there's something that needs to be followed up. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Do you have any final words, Jo?
No, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for both being involved and, well, I suppose, leading the development of this resource, and for all the feedback that's gone on for the last 2.5 years. Some of the questions today were really challenging, but I would expect no less from you guys, and I feel like, challenging is what we need. And again, going back to that point, if the information in this isn't right, let me know, and let's make sure that we keep on improving and get it better next year.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending, everyone. I'm going to stop this webinar now. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.